Thank you so much for that. Welcome to our kickoff of our National Week of Action, everybody. We're so glad that you're here to join us today, and we're not going to delay. We're going to kick it off with our panelists, and we're going to start with Antonio, then Deborah, then Al, and then Ghadah, and then Fernando. Antonio, take us away.
I introduce myself? Whatever.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. My name is Antonio Travis. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. I run an organization called Black Man Rising Movement that's centered in healing. It's a career-focused healing mentorship program. And we also provide advocacy for our folks in our community. And that's it. I stop.
All right, thank you so much. And I just want to be mindful that we do have the interpreters. So be mindful that we definitely should be speaking clearer and slowly so that they can interpret for those that need that interpretation. Deborah, you're up next.
You're on mute, Mama Deborah.
Okay, sorry. Good afternoon, everybody. It's so good to be here. My name is Deborah Watkins. I'm the founder of a Black Education Network, previously called the California Alliance of African American Educators. We are 19 years old, and we're an education justice organization with members throughout the country. We have some signature programs. One is a STEM program that I founded 19 years ago, where there are no gaps. 100% of our kids go to college, 90% graduate in 4 years with their BA or BS degrees, and 50% of those degrees are in STEM. And the reason I like to frame ABID's work with that particular program is because it's just one of 3 other institutions that I've helped start to advance educational equity throughout the country. And I like to elevate the fact that it can be done. Black children can be educated well, and that's what we stand for. So I appreciate the invitation to be here. I am also on DSC's coordinating council, and I am honored to serve.
Thank you so much for that, Deborah. Next, I'm going to go to Fernando.
Thank you. Fernando Martinez. Buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for having me here. I'm the field organizer for the Education Justice Alliance, which is a Wake County-based Black and Brown parent organization that is working towards dismantling the school-to-prison pipeline. And now in these days, I would live in the school-to-prison to deportation pipeline. And we do that by empowering and working in leadership development, training for parents and students and also other members of the community, so they are aware and educated of the issues, and we engage them after that in community organizing campaigns, more specifically campaigns that are aiming to change the school policy in the books, but also would push for changes in practices that oftentimes are not reflected in the books. Yeah, and we are also members of the coordinating committee for the Dignity in Schools campaign. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for that, Fernando. Our next distinguished guest is Al White. Thank you so much for being here. You're on mute, Al.
On mute? What about now?
You're perfect.
Okay, great. Well, hello everyone, and it's good to be here to participate in this week of action. We just finished doing a little week of action piece here in Montgomery County in Mississippi. I'm the Executive Director of Action, Communication, and Education Reform. We have 3 programs of work: civic engagement, youth leadership development, and Project Khem, which deal with culture, art, and media, as well as a blues festival. So one of the things that has brought us into the work has been around school push out. And that started in 1897, and we've been doing that kind of work, filing lawsuits, trying to bring about positive social change here in Montgomery County. But it started under the leadership of Southern Echo, working with them in terms of their work throughout the South. And so I'm happy to be a part of this process.
Thank you so much for that, Al. And last but not least, we have Ghadah.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Ghadah Makoshi. I'm a community advocate with the ACLU of Pennsylvania. I'm focused mostly on school policing issues within school districts in Allegheny County. In 2018, we started a project looking at arrest trends within the county. Our goals were to reduce unnecessary arrests, eliminate summary citations, increase alternatives, but mostly it was also to educate school leaders through our school policing summits about the collateral consequences of involvement with the justice system, with police, and what their responsibilities were and what control they had over making changes with regard to the involvement of police as well as discipline policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Now that we know who we have today, we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get right into the discussion. The first question I have for all of you: what are two major challenges students in your community face at the moment? And how has COVID exacerbated that? And I'm going to start with Al.
Yes, thank you. For us, it's broadband in terms of one of the challenges, because a lot of the students live in the rural area. And when we first approached our school district, they came back with, even when we mentioned that, you know, there was CARE funding to buy the technology in terms of the iPad, they responded with the remark that they could not buy them and that the students had to purchase their own iPads. And some students that live within, this city, so to speak, would have access, but those individuals living in the rural area, there's a lack of broadband, are not able to do that. And the other one has been a fight that we has been doing for several years, is getting more African American school board members at the table of decision making. We filed a lawsuit, brought the Justice Department in a couple of years ago, and we finally won that battle in terms of having all school board members, either for the Winona School District, was appointing their school board members. And in that process, we were being left out. So we won the battle with help from the Justice Department to have all school board members elected from the Board of District. So we know that we're going to have 2 African American boards, right? And then there's some good accountable supervisor districts, and that election comes off November the 3rd. So hopefully folks will turn out to vote. That's a challenge, but it's a good challenge. It's a good fight. But when we fight, we win. So we're hopeful.
Thank you for that, Al. Ghadah, I'm going to give you the opportunity now to tell us what's happening in the East Coast.
All right, thanks. So the 2 major challenges, I think, prior to COVID and exacerbated by COVID are equity or inequity, and then issues around racism or bias, particularly around school discipline. So before COVID, I think this showed up in our communities, the inequity through inequitable resources, access to mental health support. And of course, once COVID hit, that was exacerbated. And it really highlighted the gaps that we had as far as which students had access to devices, which students had access to the internet, as well as when we have here parents that don't speak English and they're trying to support their children at home and they can't understand what's going on. So that was one of the things. One of the ongoing issues as well are students with disabilities are being left behind right now. And our state and our district is more focused on ensuring that sports continues and that people can play, but not so much our students that are really vulnerable right now. As far as the discipline, we have some major issues here in Allegheny County. So 67% of all of our school-based arrests in this county were of Black youth, even though Black youth only account for 19% of the population. So essentially, Black youth are being arrested at 8.5 times the rate of white youth here. And when we look at the largest school district, Pittsburgh Public School District, in this part of the state, 81% of all school-based arrests are happening to Black youth, with Black girls being arrested at 11 times the rate of white girls. And then looking at students with disabilities, 35% of the students arrested had a disability. And again, they only account for less than 20% of the students there. So these are all issues that are, were issues before COVID that are being exacerbated. And we haven't seen a lot with the discipline right now, but there are some inequities with some school districts wanting the camera on and others not, and respecting students' privacy. So those are all issues that we're working through right now.
Absolutely. I can hear the connections. It seems like it's from the East Coast to the West Coast to the South. It looks like all of us are engaged in the same challenges and inequities. I'm going to move on to our second question for our other panelists. COVID has radically changed student learning. Has school discipline changed with it? If so, how? If not, how has it not? And this is a question for Debra.
I'm still stunned by what Ghadah just shared. 81%. I've been in this work for 43 years. This is my 43rd year in education. And when I started back in 1977, teaching high school in the heart of Silicon Valley, there were no police on any of our campuses. It was there were predominantly white schools. And so what I've seen in the long view is that the blacker and browner the school gets, the more they feel they need to criminalize these young people. Even SROs, because I've seen even SROs, school resource officers, escalate issues with Black children. In this COVID and brown children. I usually say them in the same breath because the issues that happen to Black kids in Silicon Valley happen to brown kids as well. What I scan, because because the BID is a national organization, I scan the landscape to see how things are going with the reopening of schools throughout the country. And it's bad everywhere. It's bad everywhere. I have not found one school district that has reopened. I'm talking about virtual learning. I'm not even talking about, being in person. You probably all heard about the case, I believe in Colorado, where the little Black boy had a Nerf gun, and they sent, 2 sheriffs out to his house. If you're not familiar with that story, just Google it. But it was so obscene what they did. So no, learning has changed dramatically, but discipline policies have not.
Okay, thank you for that. Fernando, can you tell us what's going on in North Carolina and in your region of North Carolina in regard to policing and surveillance?
Thank you for the question. So the thing in Wake County, North Carolina, is that we do have several programs within Wake County Public Schools, including the lack of transparency and the lack of engagement. And obviously, we do have a heavily militarized school system, which nowadays, not only the middle schools, but also the not only the middle school and the high schools, but also elementary schools start seeing the regular presence of police officers. So before COVID, we have been fighting, obviously, for years first we were fighting to limit the role of police in the schools, in a way that they don't engage police officers in enforcing the student code of conduct. And then as our political analysis and we were more strong and bold in our demand, we actually started demanding the removal of police officers from the schools. But before COVID-19, we had in North Carolina as a whole, almost 50% of all the juvenile and criminal court referrals were coming from the schools themselves, from SROs. In Wake County, it was close to 30% of all the school referrals. So we have seen, obviously, an effort from the school district to make sure that students have access to devices, but with providing students and families with devices, it also comes the online surveillance piece that we are really concerned about it. Even though asking for public records, we have challenged the school district around whether or not they're hiring outside software companies and other providers to monitor the student behavior on the school district devices, and they say no. We are concerned that police department themselves are engaging in monitoring student behavior. And also finally admitted about 10 days ago that the school district, even though they don't hire an external provider to monitor student behavior when they're using the school district devices, they say that they do have the capacity in-house to actually monitor student behaviors in the browsing history and other stuff when they are using devices that belong to the school. We also hear, obviously, from parents and community that teachers are sending other messages to the students that is opposite to what the school district is saying. For example, here in Wake County schools, the central office has said that students don't necessarily have to have the webcam on when they are in online instruction, but teachers have been pushing for students to have the camera on as they are present in the classroom. We do also hear from teachers that they are overworked, that they're working long hours, and they're not necessarily getting the support from the central office or from the school district that they're supposed to have. We are in a mixed school district because we do have, I don't know if people know, but we have 12 different municipalities in Wake County, and few of them are urban. We are in the capital city, but also we have rural communities as well. So we do are facing some challenges as well when it comes to technology, when it comes to access to internet. But we also hear from parents that even though food have been very abundant, like we have a lot of churches and the school district providing food, they also struggling with food, and they have to make decisions oftentimes whether to pay some utility bills or actually purchase food for their families. So the school district is also engaging in sending hotspots to like different neighborhoods, like mobile homes, which is good. But then we hear from families that they have to, because they have to work, leave some of the students alone, and they don't necessarily focus and engage in the classroom, but also they don't have the necessary space to actually focus on the class, like stay in front of the computer, because they don't have their own home office, and they have to share offices with other students that are also in online instructions at the time. A lot of families don't have a desk, like where they can actually, the student can sit down and actually work. So a lot of racial disparities and inequities in Wake County Public Schools. And just to finish, because I know we don't have time, there is a huge racial divide between reopening the schools now and don't open in the schools until they are actually safe. Black and brown and other vulnerable communities are working and communicating with the school district, even though we suffer a lot from the lack of childcare and the lack of actually having that support from other family members. But we also concerned with our health. And then we actually see a lot of white parents demanding the opening of the schools right away. So we also have this mixed messages that we are also seeing. But when it comes to the criminalization of Black and brown students, We believe that we're making some progress because we had demanded the removal of police officers from the regular classroom environment and implementing peace builder programs, or what we call intervention counselors. And that conversation seems to be taking off among board members. So hopefully we're going to move the needle on that direction, on the positive direction in the near future.
Thank you for that, Fernando. Antonia, we would love to hear how things have changed for student learning in regard to discipline as well.
Of course. Well, as you know, in New Orleans, we're completely 100% charter out here. And so just to kind of put context behind it, I want to say it was either in 2016 or 2017. I'm not sure. I know I testified against the bill, but it was an act called Act 91 that was passed out here in Louisiana, which basically stripped our school board of its power to govern schools and gave all of the power to those charters. So the charter boards are actually like, they have all the power. So you can't like really necessarily go to the school board out here when you have issues, because the only thing that they can do is revoke or renew a charter. Like they like contracts, like that's their job now. So when we talk about discipline, what shows up in New Orleans especially is like you just shine the light brighter on poverty. Because what happens is, and Fernando was saying it, is that schools want kids to be in spaces like these spaces, and they want them to have, like, they want them to fully focus on what's going on. However, people live with aunties, grandmas, and everything else. And the cost of living in New Orleans is extremely high. So folks in my community, you have to, you have to have a lot of folks who live together in order to, make ends meet. And so what happens is kids are being punished because you can see somebody in their background. You maybe can hear somebody talking when their mic unmuted or something like that, things they can't control. So kids are actually being punished because of, their living conditions, right? And so what happens is schools, when COVID happened, schools just, they assumed that kids had, like Fernando said, kids had access, kids have their own room with a desk and they just can sit there and then, and that's not the case. That's not reality in my community, right? Kids have all type of stuff going on in their environment, and I teach a class, so I see that. I see kids who, have stuff going on. And I'm not a teacher, I've never been a teacher, but if I can see that kids living in certain conditions, you just have to adjust. And all I tell them is mute yourself and just type in the chat. And it's not, that's it. It's not that serious. But poverty it's definitely shining a light on poverty and how poverty and discipline is connected, especially in New Orleans, with the zero tolerance policies that are enforced out here. And again, I brought up Act 91 because you have to attack, like out here, you have to fight those schools individually. Like you can't, like, it's not like a governing board that you can just go to and just try to eradicate this. You have to go like literally infiltrate from school to school and have this battle. And we actually had a case out here where a kid had a BB gun. It was out of the camera, but his little brother tripped over it. So he picked it up and moved it so his little brother wouldn't trip over the BB gun. Again, his little brother's also in the frame. He can't control that. It's probably babysitting. We don't know. But his little brother tripped over the BB gun and he just put the BB gun, he probably wasn't paying attention. He just put the BB gun down behind him, which was in view of the teacher. So they were trying to expel him for that, for trying to remove the BB gun, and, out of the way so his brother won't fall over it. And so out here, like, I wouldn't say discipline hasn't changed. It's just evolved. They just went from policing you in schools to policing you in your house. And they just telling you what you can and can't do in your own house. Like they telling you, like, parents, you can't be right here at this time, and you bet not. You're like I don't know. It's crazy the way these people operate out here. But us, again, being 100% charter, like, that battle looks a little different because these schools have all the power and no accountability. They're accountable by their board that they appoint. So that's how it looks out here.
Absolutely. I think you have raised a very important point, how the charter school movement, a lot of parents were sold something, right? A lot of parents were told, because your neighborhood school is failing, so here's a charter school. This is a choice for you, right? But a lot of times parents did not really understand What is it that I'm getting my child into? A lot of parents, even today, do not understand that charter schools are their own boards of education. And I'm a proponent that charter schools are publicly funded. And once we turn over our public dollars into that school system, they become privatized dollars. That's what happens to your public dollar when we engage, in the charter school system. And we have to, like you said, you have to, from each charter school, its own board of education. So if you have a problem there, you have to learn how to navigate within that system. Here's a whole other system that a parent has to navigate, especially dealing with discipline. And it's very unfortunate, coming from New York City, we had high discipline happenings with our charter schools that were introduced into primarily Black and Brown communities as the great new hope in education, right? So you bring up a very good point of what has happened in New Orleans. So we have to be very careful that during this pandemic, that the privatizers are, looking at their opportunities here. We have to be very, conscious that this is a time that, when we are most vulnerable around our public schools. Now, mind you, public schools were not serving us at the level that we know Black and Brown children needed to be served. That's where the inequities come in. So we have to be on our post even more so now. But this is an opportunity, right? We're not going to leave it there. This is a real opportunity for us to reimagine education, re-envision education, to get our demands met. This is an opportunity for us to do that, those of us that are advocating. The final question, because now I'm really excited about this conversation. Thank you so much for that information. You guys are doing a great job with this. Final question. If there was something you could add or take away to a reimagined school system to help children thrive, what would that be? And I'm going to start with Al. Al, you're still on mute, by the way.
What about now? Can you hear me now?
You're perfect.
Great. So one of the things that I learned in working with the Algebra Project with Bob Moses and Dave Dennis is that once you engage and empower the students, it takes on a whole new meaning of learning in terms of learning their learning style. So one of the things that, in terms of my imaginary school, would be to take away grades, right? Take away grades, all that testing, because a lot of time that's what teachers are doing. They're teaching to the test, right? So my imaginary school would be a innovative, creative school where thinking is out of the box, and out of the box in the context that you're bringing real life kinds of issues to play, and and the students are smart now. They mastered the technology, right? So operating on that kind of level where it's real learning going on, and the learning is based off the learning styles of the students. That's me. I think you're on mute.
Yes, you're on mute, Khem.
Of course I'm on mute. It's my turn to be on mute and talking, right? I love it. I was moving on to Debra. How would you reimagine our schools today?
Well, because I am probably the one who has spent the most time in these miseducating, dysfunctional schools around the country, let me just say that I would blow it up and start all over with everything. Everything needs to be changed. These schools never worked for Black and Brown kids. They didn't work for white kids in many cases. And I just think that we need to start with the educators. The schools of education that are training these teachers need to be blown up as well. need to redesign how teachers are trained in this country. Most of the teachers, because of the nature of the beast, are white teachers, and they are ones who don't have any cultural reference with the children that they teach. Now, mind you, I went to all whites, predominantly white schools, and I only had white teachers from K to 12. And I am who I am today because of white teachers. However, I am the exception to the rule, because not only do I know people in my own family who were traumatized by the same teachers who loved me, but I had a lot of friends who went through that system and did not come out whole. So I think we need to blow up the schools of education and create a new way that not just white teachers are taught, Black teachers. There's some Black teachers who terrorize Black kids as well. I'm just keeping it real. There are Latino teachers who terrorize Latino kids. They're Asian. Listen, you know, what I call educational terrorism, it transcends race. So you have Black teachers who are no good for Black kids, Latino teachers who are no good for Latino kids, Asian teachers who are no good for Asian kids. It's throughout the spectrum. So number one, blow up the schools of education, start over with a humanizing way of teaching people to teach children. Number two, blow up the current school systems, start over completely. Ask the parents, and then ask the question, what is education for? Creating, young people who will enter a capitalistic society where it's a dog-eat-dog world? Or do we want to create human beings who care about not only the climate, but about each other? So we have to think everything. We have to reimagine everything. And I could just go on, but I will stop right there.
Thank you for that. That's a question for every panelist. I'm going to ask Ghadah, it's your turn, please, in reference to how would you reimagine, the school system?
Oh, building on what everyone has said before me, I wanted to start with a quote. So from Dr. Bettina Love, we want to do more than survive abolitionist teaching in the pursuit of educational freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And she states, to even begin to attack our destructive and punitive educational system, pedagogies that promote social justice must help educators understand and recognize America and its schools as spaces of whiteness, white rage, and white supremacy, all of which function to terrorize students of color. And so for me, looking at it, what I look from a very policy kind of way of what the schools are doing. So I would start by ensuring that all school policies, by all practices, are structured to prevent the criminalization of our most vulnerable students, our Black and Brown youth, our youth with disabilities. All policies need to be reviewed with that in mind. So taking it as like a real practical example, our school's code of conduct, it would be written in clear, objective terms. It would remove the opportunity for discretion and bias, because when discretion is allowed, then all of this seemingly like neutral decision-making is not in fact race neutral, because white is considered the racial norm, right? And so again, considering that 80% of our school teachers are white, and we see racial disproportionality in school discipline with things like defiance, disrespect, these categories are inherently vague and normative. And so our students of color are the ones that are disproportionately punished. And just like Deborah said, right, there's other things that we can do, a ban on suspensions in all grades for nonviolent infractions, real restorative justice practices, an end to racist and classist standardized testing, more diversity of like our teachers, more counselors and social workers, the list goes on. As Deborah said, just blow it all up and start again.
Thank you for that. I want to throw in another just on one other thing we have to think about, that there is a lack of teachers, right? And we're talking about blowing up the system. And I'm going to ask Deborah, I'm going to go back to you because I know you're an educator. We're really, because you mentioned that, starting with the teachers first. Right now, how would we begin to re-engage, our children, right? This millennial age of even having an interest in teaching, because the profession has been treated so badly that we have a lack of individuals, that are even interested in going into that profession. By chance, do you have like a strategy of what we could do today in that regard to rebuild our teaching force so that we can blow it up?
Thank you. I'm so glad you asked me that question, because I've actually been working on a strategy for the past 2 years. Linda Darling-Hammond had appointed me to a oversight committee to rewrite what teachers need to know and be able to do to get certified in California. And in the process, we were able to get in lots of the things that matter to us, like culturally relevant pedagogy, restorative justice, just all kinds of things that matter to us. And one of the things that I mentioned to the woman over the certification system in California was the creation of what was called Future Teachers of America when I was in high school. And I was, 1 year I was president of that club. And so I want to create Future Teachers for Black America clubs in high schools around the country, because the profession is greatly maligned. And kids are saying, ooh, I would never want to be a teacher. That's the last thing I'd want to do, because they've seen how teachers have been disrespected in their own short lives. So I think what I'm going to be working on with my organization is Future Teachers of Black America. And the good news about what I'm going to be working on starting in California, in that I also am the founder of Black Students of California United. I helped start that organization 7 years ago. And we're in 94 schools throughout the state of California, with thousands of Black students in the Black student unions. And so we want to use those students to help us create that pipeline of future teachers. But we have to explain to them why it's critically important for them to join the profession. We have to tell them why we need them in the profession. And once we've told thousands of Black children across the country why it's critically important that they join the profession, then we can start creating a pipeline for future teachers.
Thank you. Antonio, what do you reimagine for your school system that's already been blown up?
Say, everybody else said, but when I picture it, and I have a picture in my mind, I think of a DSC biannual conference where everybody come, everybody smart, everybody get challenged and triggered, then they hug each other and go home. That's what I see. That's like the visual picture. Everything in what everybody else said. That's my thing like that.
Well, at least we're all in agreement right now, what we imagine, what we want to see happen, for children. One thing, I've been watching Principal Kafele, right? And he's doing like these free workshops for our school leaders, every Saturday morning. And he was doing one workshop where he was, actually talking about, the words that we use are in our schools, and the fact that we use the word discipline, right? He said, we have to start changing the language first. Start there changing the language for what we want to see happen in education and in our schools. So he suggested that instead of talking about discipline, let's tell children instead of talking about school rules, let's talk about expectations. You know, tell children what you expect in the classroom instead of saying, this is my rule. This is what these are the do's and the don'ts and things like that. You know, change even the language of how we're interacting with one another, even in that profession. That's like one, you know, one step there that, you know, that we can take when we're reimagining, you know, what schools are going to look like. You know, I was very fortunate that I went to Portland where they created, you know, a community school. And this school has all the services that the children need in that particular school that they built. It was a collaboration. And I hope Mama Sheila is on here that she could share a little bit about that school. It's fabulous. They have a supermarket, they have a parent resource room, you know, so there is somewhere, you know, where someone has begun reimagining what school can look like through those community schools. So it's not that we don't know what to do, and it's not that somewhere someone has started, you know, that revisioning of education. We just have to all, like you said, get in the room together and pull this plan together. I think that that would be a great convening for us as part of DSC. Now I'm going to actually turn this over to the community and see what questions we have in the chat, and turn it over to, I guess, Lakita or Tafari, if you're keeping up with the chat.
Sure, no, I can jump in and do that. So again, just want to remind folks, great discussion so far. Just want to remind folks that we are streaming on Facebook Live as well. And so if anyone does want to continue to participate in the discussion that way, they can do so accordingly as well. We have one question in so far, or two questions in so far, from Samuel. Samuel says, first, what are the assumptions upon which the schools of education, and by extension, the school districts that hire their graduates are built? So, Samuel, if I'm interpreting your question correctly, yeah, like what are the assumptions that people in hiring positions are making about folks as they bring them into the fold? And if that is true, I will toss it back to you, Khem, to our panelist who feels inspired to try to answer it.
Yeah, I was specifically addressing that question. I wanted to throw it out there to everybody, but I was specifically thinking about Deborah.
Okay, so yeah, Deborah, take it away, and if someone wants to take it up.
Yes, I knew Samuel was thinking about me, and I was excited when I saw. I was happy to see that question in the chat. Thank you. I just wrote in the chat that a BIN sponsored a broadcast last Saturday featuring Dr. Joyce King, who I consider, you know, the foremost thinker around Black education in the country. If you're not familiar with Dr. Joyce King's work, please Google her. And many of you are familiar with Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings' work. She was also on my broadcast. And I served as a moderator, and I asked them to imagine schools. And Dr. Ladson, and you can see the full 2-hour presentation by going to a BIN's Facebook page where the broadcast is listed. But, you know, I said those things about, you know, what is the purpose of schooling, right? So to Samuel's point about, you know, what are the assumptions that we're making about, you know, how we educate the people that come into that school of education, and then we send out into districts. And I think one of the assumptions made is that the school system is an one size fits all. That's one assumption I think that is made. And so we tend to teach to the mediocre as opposed to the brilliant, right? And so we go into these school systems, and even though we have children from a broad range of gifts, we're pretty much teaching to the middle child. And the ones that don't show up brilliant the way we think they should are sort of sidelined.
You're muted. Oh, okay, great.
Yeah. So that's just one assumption that's made, but that's a very long conversation, Samuel, and you know it is. We could talk all day about those assumptions. I just wanted to give one. But do you have anything, Samuel? Samuel, what would you like to, can you give some feedback? What are you thinking?
You know, I was asking the question. Because when people talking about, you know, when people talk about, and I have my background is I'm a pastor. I'm a retired pastor, and have been involved in issues of criminal justice, because that's, you know, my ministry has been at the cross section between religious faith and criminal justice. I spent many years as a prison chaplain, and my wife was a school administrator, and so we sort of, you know, we approached we met in the middle, approaching from opposite sides. And so when people talk about training, you know, and educating, I often ask the question, you know, again, what is the assumption? It's one thing to be trained, but training of any kind is based on certain assumptions. And I'm just curious as to what are the assumptions upon which retraining will be based.
Right, absolutely. Thank you for that. Fernando, how do you reimagine school?
Thank you for the question. Since the pandemic hit and the stay-at-home orders were put in place, I hear reimagining the schools often, and I do like the idea of engaging in a community process to reimagine the school, right? I do also worry about corporations and people with money influencing the way we reimagine schools. I do worry about the online instruction that we start seeing right now. Like different school districts have different plans. Some of them are hybrid, some of them are just online 5 days a week. I do worry that that is going to lead to another push for privatizing the schools. I just wanted to say because I want us to be conscious as well of the language we use. My coworker Lita, I like how she framed it. She likes to think about radical imagination, right? And this is aligned with what Ms. Watkins and the other panelists have said earlier about blowing out the system of the teach educators, but also the school system. Once some folks have done that, I would like to engage the community. I would like to engage the families in some sort of police-free, some sort of family-centered, police-free schools that are centering the participation of families, meaning the students, but also their parents and other advocates and community members that are family, into how we can center the schools, prioritizing the student and the whole family, right? Community schools could be one of those models, but I will also visit the way schools are funded, right? The way schools are, the way we pay for education in this country is something that we also will need to revisit, in my opinion. And also I will make sure that we engage with those institutions that prepare teachers, but also those institutions that work with teachers as well, in making sure that we do have a meaningful and respectful process to increase the Black and Brown teacher pipeline. I will work with community in radically imagining what cultural competency curriculums look like, right? Not only to check the mark of equity and stuff like that, but actually see what the needs are for each of the community. And each community might look different, right? So I will work on that as well. But definitely I will keep those three elements. One, making sure the new schools that we build together are built together collectively and center the families. Two, that we don't have militarized schools in our communities. And three, that we actually engage intentionally on developing the teacher force and maybe put some stimulus, some money behind that, so we can get more Black and Latinx and other groups like indigenous groups and other groups to actually get into the teaching force, and I work with them on making sure they get the licensing and they don't have to get student debt and that kind of stuff.
Okay, Tafari, do we have any other questions? Because I definitely want to continue the conversation.
At the moment, there was one more question that Samuel had asked, and that was, out of curiosity, does anyone know whether there's a parallel discussion happening in poor rural communities where statistically whites, particularly white women, make up the fastest growing segment of the US prison population, thus increasing the risk factors of poor white kids? I ask this because I'm curious if common cause can be made with such efforts.
When I think about, I'm just going to take a stab at that only because, you know, in Guilford County, we have such a mixed community of urban and rural communities. I have to say that for our school system, I think that throughout this pandemic, we have definitely taken, you know, a holistic approach in what education is looking like for those students in those different areas, by looking specifically at providing the types of resources that they may need in the rural communities, by providing the fact that they don't have the broadband in that regard. So we provided broadband through, you know, our yellow buses and things like that, opening up learning centers for those students to access. We looked at reaching out to the community because we had a lack of devices for students around Guilford County. So I think that, you know, when we have, you know, leadership in place, right, that can look at a holistic approach, then that's almost one step up in the win column, you know, for us in reimagining education. When we haven't even talked about our students that learn differently, right? Our students with with disabilities, right? The students that are covered under a federal law of the kind of appropriate education that they are supposed to receive. You know, they are very vulnerable right now because many of those students weren't able to get their, you know, their therapies and things like that. So this, I think, is a place for true parent empowerment. You know, this is a place where parents, like I said before, can really make their demands. And also, I want us to talk about how do we get students to the table? Because here in Guilford County, our high school students, the plan for the high school students to see a teacher in person is not until January 20th as part of our plan, because the superintendent saw a need to get the younger children in first on a rolling basis, right? Because she said they were the most at risk. So, you know, let's talk about how we are going to re-engage our student population, because schools should be student-centered. And I'm going to go back to Al, like, what are you doing organizing wise, or what are students saying, you know, where you are around this time of COVID? What's the feedback looking like?
Well, number one, they're saying that they don't like engaging with the technology at home. As a matter of fact, I have a 11-year-old, and so we're homeschooling him, right? Because he has a high risk of catching anything. And most of the parents have their kids out of school here. They have a hybrid, but set up in the school system. But now they're saying that next week, they're gonna open the schools up for everybody to come back, right? So there's a mixed feeling among parents, but the students, they want to be engaged, of course, with their peers. They, you know, in terms of the traditional model, right? So that's where we are with that piece now. What we've been doing is keeping pressure on the school board, right? To make sure they got all the following all the CDC guidelines,
Okay.
those kind of issues. That's where we put in the pressure on them.
Okay, that's great. Ghadah, what's going on with students? What kind of feedback are you hearing? You know, what's the word on the street for students?
It's very similar to what Al said. And I myself also have an 11-year-old that is medically fragile and can't be in the schools. But that's what we're hearing from a lot of the students, especially the high school students, is that they want to be back in school. They want to be with their peers. It's really hard to do online. Some kids do better online, but it's that they academically do better, but it's that social context, that mental health, the not having the connection with their peers in the same way that a lot of them are missing, and I think is adding a lot of anxiety and stress on top of everything else that's already going on. So that's a lot of what we're hearing, and we're also working with our school board to make sure that if they do reopen, the plan right now is tentatively November 9th in a hybrid model, that they do everything safely, again, according to CDC regulations.
Okay, I have another question. Has anybody had the opportunity to go visit a school? Because I know here we have retrofit all of our classrooms with 50% occupancy. So in your school districts, are they doing pretty much the same thing, not allowing the capacity of the number of students in the classrooms? Because all of our seats now are 6 feet apart, you know, students. So therefore, maybe we have 12 students in the classroom. Fernando, are they doing that?
Our schools in Wake County are not open yet. They're still online, but there is a plan when they open that they're gonna do gradually. K to 12, I think they're gonna open on October 26th. And yes, the 50% capacity is something that we start seeing in the plans, and that is part of the conversation. I think they're gonna open another a group of schools on November 16, and then they're gonna grades 4 to 5, they're gonna stay until the first semester. We do have also different tracks in Wake County, like all year round tracks. So, but when they do open, the plan is to open gradually, and they're gonna pay attention to the 50% occupancy capacity, and they're gonna also they're trying to work on finding childcare providers as well for the teachers that need it. So that's what we start seeing here. But in your previous question, I also want to add that we have the privilege of working with the Wake County Black Student Coalition. And contrary to, and let me just be honest, it's not like they're no preferred to be in the classroom. It's not like they miss that face-to-face interaction, but we are privileged to work with this group of people that also understand that we are a vulnerable community, and when the schools open, that they need to do it in a safely way. So they actually are a proponent of taking all the precautions and making sure that the educators and everybody have the PPE that they need, and also they follow the guidelines from the healthcare providers as well. So that's what we're also seeing. But what they are demanding is very simple. They just want to be listened to. So if we want to engage the students, we find out that one of the best ways to do it, if you're really committed to do that, is to do a listening session with the students, like in a way that is non-judgmental, and actually they feel that they are part of the conversation, for the future of their school. So I will encourage us to think about listening session with the students, both at the school level, but also in our communities.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. We have another question from our chat that says, could someone speak to the connection between SROs and arrests and student outcomes, including dropout? I'm not sure if anyone is prepared with bringing any type of data with them today to answer that question, or that might be something that we could follow up with.
Ghadah has excellent data. She shared excellent data at the beginning of her presentation.
Right, she did.
Yeah, I don't know if I have I did a presentation on this specific thing too, but I don't memorize the numbers. It does increase dropout rates. Having police in schools also increases the arrest rate for very minor infractions, particularly for Black and Brown students.
Right.
Having them physically there, right? Because that's what they're there for. And people will say, well, we want them there as a counselor, as a mentor, but that's a conflict of interest because students can't even confide in police without potentially saying things that could get themselves or their families in trouble. So yeah, there's definitely a correlation. And Aaron Kupchak has actually written a number of articles on this. So he's a person to look up. He's written with statistics and the data throughout the nation.
And if I may add, also I shared earlier that here in North Carolina, like it's 40%, I think it's almost 50%, but it's 40% of all the criminal and juvenile court referrals are coming from police officers that are placed in the school buildings. So now that the schools have been closed, we have seen an amazing dropout of these court referrals. So a reduction on the court referrals. So almost if we completely remove all SROs from North Carolina public schools, the juvenile and criminal courts in North Carolina are gonna cut in half, we hope, the number of cases that they're seeing. In Wake County, it's almost 30% of court referrals are coming because we have police in the schools in the first place. But also, I want to mention that one of our partners in North Carolina, in Wake County, help us to look into all the different type of misbehavior that could have been dealt under the student code of conduct and all the reasons why students were referred to criminal and juvenile court, like when they press charges against the students. And really, other than very small number of guns and drugs related cases, most of those could have been dealt under the current student code of conduct. So we do know that for our own experience that the problem of having police in the schools is having police in the schools in the first place. Because when you do have police in the schools in the first place, the leadership of the school, the principals and other classroom teachers rely on the police officer for disciplinary type of misbehavior. And oftentimes, like I said, all the infractions, we have already those listed in the student code of conduct, and they could be dealt under that. But the police officer choose to press charges against the students. And also we hear anecdotal stories from some families that, some white families that their children behave certain way and they were offered to be referred to some kind of diversion program. But when the Black student does the same, they are immediately arrested or are pressing charges against that. A few years ago, we had a case of a Latina student that got into a fight in the school bus. The situation was dealt with the principal under the student code of conduct. This person was suspended, but the day after, the police officer thought that that wasn't punishing enough, and this person needed to be punished more severely. So he pressed charges against this person, and she was in the foster care system. So the family didn't want her back, and this student actually ended up being incarcerated for more than 3 weeks. And it was very hard to get a house and another family to take her because this police officer just thought that this person needed to be punished severely, and the suspension wasn't enough of a punishment. So it is a direct relationship with a student arrest in Wake County, and I dare to say that it's across the country.
Wait,
Right.
I need to, Khem,
Go ahead, Deborah.
I just need to jump in here for a minute. Remember, I've been in this field for 43 years. I could give you example after example after example of just what Fernando was saying. We call it the school to prison pipeline on purpose, because back in the day when I first started teaching, like I said at the beginning of the call, there were no officers on the campuses when they were white. And here's what we say in education: when white kids, kill at Sandy Hook and at the school in Florida, the school in Colorado, the Black kids get punished. It's not, our kids are not out there slaughtering their peers. And what those slaughters were horrible, horrible. I mean, they still, I mean, they were just horrible what happened. But then they penalize the Black kids. So, and make things worse for them, and so I'm not saying, penalize the white kids and make things worse for their schools. I think it all begins with mental health of the teacher, of the teacher. If the teacher is seeing Black and brown children as threats, or they're scared of them, or, all of Monique Morris's, stuff about push out and how Black girls are seen as older than they really are. And Tamir Rice murdered with a BB gun, right? I mean, we can go on and on about the sordid stories related to systemic racism and the role that it plays in our schools. We could go on and on about those. But I just want to say that it all begins with the teacher. And I have in my book, there is a quote. Let me see if I can find a copy of my book. It used to sit over here. I have a quote at the beginning of one of the chapters in my book, and I'll go grab the book so that you can help somebody else. But I have to remind teachers when I coach principals and teachers, I have to remind teachers every day about their power to humiliate or to encourage, to demonize or to elevate. Teachers forget their power. And so that's why I said, start with blowing up the schools of education. And therefore we can create teachers that don't come into these school systems afraid of the kids. My thing to those if you are afraid of the kids and you feel that you have to call the police on them, you don't need to be in the profession. Because when I taught back in the day, I'm old, when I taught, there were no teachers, there were no SROs, there were no police. And people would say to me now, teachers will say to me now, because they know I train teachers, and they'll say, well, Deborah, what if something happens? I said, dial 911. If something happens, dial 911, but in California, I serve on the Fixed Food Discipline Coalition, and we have passed legislation to outlaw willful defiance, which is some of the stuff Fernando was talking about. Willful defiance, we wanted it K-12 because that was the catch-all that teachers were using to suspend kids in California. So first we outlawed willful defiance suspensions K-3. Then we outlined willful defiance suspensions 4 to 8. Racism dies hard, okay? We wanted K-12 to begin with when we started working on this, 5 years ago or whatever. So now we're working on willful defiance, being out as an excuse for suspension being outlawed 9 through 12. Why didn't they just give it to us all at once? And that's a rhetorical question because I know the answer. Systemic racism dies hard.
Absolutely. And we know the cost of the prison system, right? The money that goes into the prison system and the dollars that they give us for educating our students, that's an inequity in and of itself, right? The cost of incarceration of one human life and the cost of educating one student. America has to think about it differently. Those that control the purse definitely, have to think about what is it that we want education to do? And you said that. What is it that we reimagine, education, to be? I'm glad someone asked that question because someone had sent me an article in regard to, a young lady upstate New York where her daughter was sent to the nurse's office and forced to undress so that she could be searched for contraband that did not exist. And the mom says, it's not fair that now I have to say to my daughter, it's okay to be Black and hyper and giddy, that it's not a crime to smile. Can you imagine, the trauma, right, that now this young lady is enduring. Thank goodness the NAACP Legal Defense Fund is, there. But why should our children have to endure these things? And coming into a place where it should be safe, coming into a place where it should be centered around my well-being, around my education. Antonio, I'm going to give you the final word around blowing up the school system, and what you really, really would like to see happen.
But see, I'm gonna be quick. So this I mean,
that's fine.
But again, it's what everybody said. But just again, not to take up too much time, but being able to experience both systems, the public school system and the charter system, in almost having the charter system push me to the point of no return, and seeing the practices that they had inside that system, but knowing that the public system in New Orleans, especially in New Orleans, was corrupt as well. I just would like to see people, like Fernando said, let's blow it up, but then let's have the people in the community at the center, because that's what we talk about all the time. Put the people in the heart of the community.